Hello, everyone. My name is Martin Michelot. I'm the Policy and International Affairs Manager of the TIC Council, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today for probably what will be one of the last webinars of the summer period. And today's webinar, organized by the TIC Council, is entitled "The TIC Sector and the Cybersecurity of Medical Devices in Europe." I wanted to say before we start a couple words about the TIC Council. The TIC Council is an international trade association that was born from the merger of two previous associations, so IFIA and CEOC. TIC Council has about 90 member companies and organizations that are active in more than 160 countries. I am sitting in Brussels, where the TIC Council has its head office, but we're joined today from colleagues who are in Washington, and we also have a presence in India, and we are slowly but surely working on a presence in China. The TIC Council is the International Trade Association representing testing, inspection, and certification companies, hence the name TIC. And I also wanted to share with you the mission of the TIC Council, which is as the voice of the global independent testing, inspection, and certification industry, to engage governments and key stakeholders in advocating for effective solutions that protect the public, support innovation, and facilitate trade. We work with our members to promote the best practices in safety, quality, health, ethics, and sustainability. On this short note of presentation of the TIC Council, it's my great pleasure to pass the floor to Dr. Michael Fübi, who is the CEO of TÜV Rheinland, one of our foremost members, and is also the president of the board of the TIC Council, who will introduce today's webinar and who will present the speakers. So, Dr. Fübi, the floor is yours.
Yeah, Martin, thank you very much. Also, welcome to everybody from my side, and particularly welcome, of course, to our guests, our external guests. I know today a good number of our members of our association are joining, but I'm also quite happy that we have a lot of participants, either from the Commission or from other associations joining. So welcome to our webinar, which is one in a series of webinars we have made now over the last weeks, particularly now during the COVID crisis, and on this way to stay in touch with you and share information, share important information, that we also can later on have some discussions on those specific sectors and topics. And today is a very hot topic for us, and this is cybersecurity and medical devices, and particularly also what we as TIC sector can contribute in this matter. And I'm very happy to introduce to you the panelists for today who share their views. First of all, it's Ana-Eva Ampelas. She's head of the unit for medical devices and hospital-based health technologies in DG Sante. Next to him, it's Dr. Abtin Rat. He's Global Director Functional Safety, Software and Digitalization for Active Medical Products in TÜV Süd. And then we have Dr. Georg Heidenreich. He's chairman of IOC CD 8001 in the International Organization of Standards. And this should be enough from my side as introduction. I wish all of you, hopefully, a lot of interesting insights you get today, and therefore I'm now handing over to the speakers.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fübi, for the kind introduction. Just a quick word before we get started. We'll have the presentation of the speakers, but I know all of you have attended a couple of webinars already. Please use the Q&A function of WebEx to ask any questions. We'll have time at the end of the webinar for a few questions to the speakers. Without further ado, I will start with Ms. Ana-Eva Ampelas for your presentation. We very much look forward to hearing from you, and thank you very much again on behalf of the TIC Council for being here today. So, Ms. Ampelas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. First of all, thanks for inviting me to this webinar on cybersecurity and medical devices, a highly relevant issue. As you mentioned, I am head of unit of the medical device unit in DG Santé since the 1st of January this year, when the file of medical devices was transferred from DG Grow to DG Santé. I would like to mainly touch upon three different topics today. If we change the slide, yes. First of all, in relation to COVID-19 and the exceptional circumstances we are in, and say a few words how that has impacted on the implementation of the new medical devices regulation. Secondly, to say a few words about cybersecurity within the current or within the new legislation on medical devices, and then also to look very briefly at some other legislative pieces that are of interest when looking into cybersecurity of medical devices. So if we start with the COVID-19 situation, I think that it is fair to say that the medical devices sector has been highly impacted by the COVID-19 crisis, and I think that all the actors active in the field of medical devices have seen this and have somehow shifted focus in the activities that we are carrying out. I think we see this both in terms of national competent authorities, notified bodies, manufacturers, and it is also something that we have seen very clearly in the European Commission and in the unit that I am heading. This has led to a very significant number of actions and activities very much related to COVID-19 and to address the situation of COVID-19. And I think I will not mention all those activities because I will leave with you the slides afterwards, because I think that the list is indeed very, very long when it comes to those activities. But I can mention a few of them, starting from the postponement of the medical devices regulation. As you all know by now, the medical devices regulation was supposed to apply from the 26th of May this year. But based on a proposal from the European Commission, the co-legislators, the Council and the Parliament decided to postpone the date of application until the 26th of May next year. The reason for this was very much to allow all the actors involved in the field to really prioritize the activities and to address the situation of COVID-19 and to alleviate a little bit the burden in terms of implementation of the new legislation. Having said that, I would like to underline that from the Commission side, we are very keen, and it's a high priority for now to really to advance and to effectively implement the new legislation. There have been also a number of other activities undertaken during this period, mainly to ramp up the production, to make sure that we have the critical devices, especially those related to COVID-19, available on the market, and to facilitate the entry into market of those different devices and products. We made some European standards related to COVID-19 related devices freely available for the manufacturers to use. There have been quite a number of other activities. I think we can change the slide, please. We have worked, for instance, also with the notified bodies to make sure that we have the possibility to renew the designations and look at the surveillance and monitoring of the notified bodies, where the designation would expire during this additional year that we are benefiting from now. I think we can change the slide again and just refer to a number of guidance documents that have been endorsed or adopted both by the Commission and by the Medical Devices Coordination Group that are directly related to the COVID-19 situation. These guidance documents relate to the notified bodies audits, where some more flexibility in terms of conducting off-site audits. We have guidance documents on ventilators, on face masks, on COVID-19 related diagnostic tests, for instance. So those are just a few of the guidance documents and other documents that have been issued and published during this period of time. I think we can move on further because I will not bore you. You can read the long list afterwards. You can stop here again, because I would also like to emphasize that despite all the focus that have been on COVID-19 during this period of crisis over the last month, we have also worked very, very closely together with the national competent authorities and other stakeholders to advance the implementation of the new legislation, both the MDR and the IVDR during this period. You will see that from this slide that there have been a quite large number of guidance documents that have been published, which are directly linked to the implementation of the legislation rather than to the COVID. There have also been other activities. You can change again, please. There have also been other activities undertaken during this period in terms of advancing the implementation. We have further advanced the work of setting up the expert panels, which will have a specific role in the higher risk devices. We have advanced further on various implementing acts that will need to be adopted. We have advanced further on the development of the UDAMED database, for instance. So there have been a lot of progress also on this, and I would like to highlight that because it is very, very important. Would also like to add that we have, of course, we can change slide again, please. We have not only worked on the MDR, but also on the IVD side. We have pursued some activities, because we should also not forget that the IVDR will also enter into application pretty soon now. It is in May 2022, and we see that also that date are coming closer and closer. So I think we really all need to speed up the efforts towards that implementation as well. So if we then move on to the second part of the presentation, looking more at the cybersecurity issue and how the new regulations address the issue of cybersecurity. So if we change the slide again, maybe just to say as a starting point that there is no specific explicit reference to cybersecurity in the new legislation, in MDR or in IVDR. But having said that, it is very clear from the new legislation that it really brings some new expectations and some new obligations related to safety, which also includes security and more particularly cybersecurity for all medical devices, including those devices incorporating a software. So if we look into the legislation, we have first of all new classification rules specific to softwares. We have increased post-market surveillance and vigilance rules in the new legislation. We have reinforced the provisions on risk management, and we have also introduced or reinforced the concept of life cycle approach. And I will come back to that a bit later, because I think that this life cycle approach is something very, very important in the new legislation. If we then look more specifically, where can we find the cybersecurity provisions in the new legislation? Well, I would like to refer in particular to Annex 1 on general safety and performance requirements in the MDR. And there you have a list of different provisions which are all relevant to cybersecurity and which would all need to be taken into consideration by the manufacturers active in the field of medical devices. So if we can move on, just looking at taking it a step forward, in fact, from the legislation, should also say that there have been three sets, yes please, there have been three sets of guidance issued and endorsed by the Medical Devices Coordination Group, which are very relevant to cybersecurity. We have the guidance document on clinical evaluation and performance evaluation of medical device software. We have the qualification and classification of software, and we have one specific guidance on cybersecurity for medical devices. So if we look in particular in the third one mentioned there, the guidance on cybersecurity for medical devices, and we can change the slide, please. We have in particular in Annex 1, we have a provision in point 17.2 in the medical devices regulation, and there is a similar provision also in the IVDR. Which really conceptualize this life cycle approach that I mentioned. And it makes it very clear that the cybersecurity requirements that are listed in Annex 1 would need to be considered and taken into account both in the pre-market aspects and in terms of the post-market aspects. So article or point 17.2 is very important in that respect. If we then take the next slide, please, you will see that there is a long list. This is actually a mapping of different provisions across the legislation that would have an impact or relevance for cybersecurity. So this is very much, I would call it, the recipe on how manufacturers would need to deal with cybersecurity in the medical devices regulation. The guidance document itself is 45 pages, and it very much develops the different requirements enshrined in the legislation. So if we look at it from a more kind of granular aspect, if we move on, we have beyond Annex 1, as I said, there is a long list of provisions, both pre-market activities and post-market activities, which are very relevant for cybersecurity and where manufacturers should be particularly aware of those provisions. So you will see them on the slide currently on the screen. Yes, please, you can change. So if we look more particularly on the IT security aspect, the guidance provides clarifications on the different Annex 1 provisions. We have guidance on IT security, information security, and operation security, as well as safety and effectiveness when it comes to cybersecurity on medical devices. And we can change slide again, looking at, yes, please. Looking also at the guidance clarifying the concept of intended use and intended operational environment of use, where it's really important that the manufacturers determine in the design phase already the inputs to protect against cybersecurity risks and different threats. Then we have the concept of reasonable foreseeable misuse, which is also very much something that needs to be considered in the risk management process and when designing a medical device. This is also specified in the guidance document. If we turn again, I wanted to refer as well to the concept of joint responsibility or shared responsibility that it is called in some other jurisdictions, which is supposed to take into account the different roles and expectations of various stakeholders. We have many different stakeholders from the manufacturer itself to healthcare providers to patients, and all those stakeholders or actors might have very different understanding and knowledge about IT or cybersecurity, and all this needs to be taken into consideration. We have the principle of secure by design, where it is important that all the expectations of cybersecurity should be considered, and that needs to be taken into consideration at the very beginning and throughout the entire life cycle. And then if we move on again, the importance of the life cycle approach as a horizontal concept, and also pointing to the fact that in the post-market phase, it is very important for the manufacturers to continuously monitor the products on the market and to gather data to identify any potential incidents or vulnerabilities that would need to be addressed. So it really starts from the design and it goes until the post-market identification of various concerns or vulnerabilities. Then if we move on, and maybe just to conclude on this section of the presentation, I think it is, as I mentioned in the beginning, it is really correct to say that there are increased expectations in terms of cybersecurity in the new legislation. This comes both with the pre-market phase and in the post-market surveillance and vigilance phase, where an effective and successful post-market cybersecurity surveillance program should include measures to ensure that the operation of the device in the intended environment. There should be a vulnerability remediation, incident response, etc. So I think that this is very much how we see the cybersecurity within the legislation. Then just very few words about other legislations that would be relevant in the field of cybersecurity. I think I would like to mention maybe 3 other cross-cutting legislations which are relevant in the field: the Network and Information Systems Directive, the General Data Protection Regulation, and the EU Cybersecurity Act. And just looking at the first one, the Network and Information Systems Directive, this is a horizontal directive where the purpose is to boost the overall cybersecurity across the EU. And it includes healthcare. It includes an obligation for the operator of essential services to take appropriate security measures and also to notify specific incidents of significant impact. If we look at the General Data Protection Regulation, this is very much focused, as you probably know, on the protection of personal data. And it applies regardless of the technology used to process the data. And then the third piece of legislation I wanted to mention is the EU Cybersecurity Act, which is a quite recent act. It was adopted in 2019. And it introduces a voluntary certification system, which is supposed to be risk-based. And I think it's also important to flag that the Commission will monitor the situation and to see after 3 years whether this kind of voluntary approach is efficient enough or whether there is a need to strengthen or to make this a bit tighter. So I think that all those need to be taken into consideration together with everything that is enshrined in the medical devices regulation, the new one. I've added a few useful links and references on this last slide. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ampelas, for your very comprehensive and very interesting presentation, which I believe is a perfect way to kick off the conversation. And without further ado, I will switch immediately to Dr. Georg Heidenreich, who will present his views on the issue. With the title of the presentation, as you can see on the screen, is Some Questions Along the Medical Device Life Cycle. So please, Mr. Heidenreich, I think we're ready to embark.
Yeah, thank you for this kind invitation. I think you can hear me. Is that fine?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. So yeah, I'm convener of a joint working group 7 with the title on the first slide, Safe, Effective, Secure Health Software, Health IT Systems, including those incorporating medical devices. That's between ISO and IEC. Okay, so now let's have a look at those questions. Now we have seen all the legal expectations as the framework in Europe for medical devices and their cybersecurity. So I do have some questions, and we're going to elaborate on this throughout the talk. And I think that standards and assessment and certification will pave the way to establish consensus in the markets how these questions should be answered. Go to the next slide. When we read the MDCG guidance, is also mentioned by Ms. Ampelas, we see that in Europe, there's a more thorough and more consistent understanding of how cybersecurity should be seen in medical devices. In United States, in the FDA guidances, we find that security is of concern for the medical device manufacturer only insofar that it's related to safety. Now, the question is here, how can you see as a manufacturer the relationship between safety and security? And the response here is kind of symbolized by this caduceus symbol, where the snakes appear to be, with meaning, seem to be safety and security, somehow related. But only if you have a design of a product, only if you have an intended use, only if you have an implementation, you can make an established, defined relationship between safety and security. Only if you have a specific situation and there is no fixed relationship between the two. So you have to carefully look at intended use, the architecture, the design, the unit implementation, and so on, to find these relationships and to determine how would security vulnerability impact or potentially impact safety of a device. So in that respect, the MDCG guidance from end of 2019 is very consistent and closer to what IT expert would expect how cybersecurity vulnerabilities would be handled in a device. Yeah. So next slide. Another question would be to rather look on CIA as the protection goals, confidentiality, integrity, availability, and this priority, as the left image symbolizes, which is called information security, yeah, where you have confidentiality, for instance, under GDPR, so as a top goal, and then integrity, availability as supporting or secondary goals, as opposed to what we symbolize on the right side as so-called operation security, where availability is first and integrity and confidentiality are supporting elements of that. And depending on the intended use, the intended operation environment, a medical device may rather consider operation security as the goal to follow during design and analysis of it. So on next slide, next question. Then it's interesting to see what's reasonably foreseeable from the manufacturer's perspective. When a manufacturer has to foresee certain scenarios, we are, unlike in safety, we have to clearly leave the area of intended use. We have to go to unintended uses when we consider the way how cybersecurity incidents may happen and how they may be performed onto clinical IT networks and on medical devices. So the question remains to the manufacturer, what scenarios can we exclude when we do analyze potential security-related scenarios? And this, to me, seems to be changing over time. The more vulnerabilities and the more attack patterns become known, the manufacturer has to redo the threat risk analysis over time, as I think, and there's no such thing as foreseeing. You can react as a manufacturer on what is known and expected, but you cannot really foresee tomorrow's platform vulnerability. I'm not naming a specific operating system, but we know that operating systems have frequent updates. Yeah, but the same is for databases. Yeah? As a manufacturer, you cannot really foresee it in a literal sense of the term. So you can just monitor and react in the scope of vigilance activities throughout. So next slide, which raises the question of how to combine performance, safety, and security in a single product. We can do that as medical device manufacturers because we are charged to reduce any risk as far as possible, as the MDR GSPR says in Annex 1. And that's been original text from the MDR Annex 1. So we have to find the right balance for safety, security, and effectiveness, which may not always be consistent goals. There may be balances when in a specific implementation or a specific intended use, those goals collide. And I can give you two examples for that. In emergency care, like having surgery and emergency situations after trauma, polytrauma, after accidents, for instance, a lengthy authentication and login procedure that results in a screen blocked after failing to enter the correct password by the surgeon, that would not be supporting safety and performance. Yeah, you would rather than sacrifice a little bit of security for the sake of availability of critical care. Yeah, that's one situation. And the other thing is that with infusion pumps and medicine pumps near field, near to the patient, there's often a wireless transmission protocol from the mobile infusion device to some control station, and there's a frequent heard desire to have that encrypted. But at the same time, these mobile devices are running on battery, and as a principle, encryption takes CPU power that would drain the battery. So eventually, the better your encryption is, the faster the battery runs low and cannot administer any medicine to the patient. So that's another example of how safety, performance, and security may collide and may have to be balanced in a specific medical device. So next question. Then eventually, if you see all these obligations to manufacturers which are related to postmark, like, the obligation to update, to monitor, to respond to incidents, wouldn't it be better in the long term to move from this concept of ship and forget, as we did in the past, towards a process where we provide safety, security, and performance to our customers using certain devices in diagnosis and therapy? Will security be the trigger to move manufacturers from product providers to service providers? So that's an interesting question. And then next slide. Assessment after standards have been written to express consensus on what I said before. Certificates and certificate assessment may provide the confidence in the use of those complex systems. And though as an industry representative, I was told not to promote certification, of course, but when you see the development of markets, you find that in an early stage of certain technology, excuse me, in the market, you find that certificates have an enabling role to establish this kind of confidence on both sides. The customer with the new technology get a kind of assurance that they get what they want, and the manufacturer gets assurance that they can access the market successfully. So a certificate can be seen as a steep road, as depicted on the left side. But once you have passed the gate successfully, you will be on a market, with lots of customers and lots of confidence by those customers that they really get what they need. So my claim is that if you translate it to new technology fields, excuse me, it's a system of regulation, as we heard before, the standards, and their successful assessment that they all should work together, I think, to improve confidence in the use of technical systems and mainly innovation. With that, I want to conclude with an appeal to manufacturers to rebuild the trust, because I think in the field of connected medical devices, those security incidents, both in hospitals as well as those affecting medical devices, have lost or destroyed a little bit of the confidence that we had in the past. So it seems to be that we have a battle to win back some of the confidence, and the overall improvement of regulation standards and the related assessment will surely win back this confidence. So do not see it as a cost, but as an effort to protect a brand, for instance. Thank you very much.
Dr. Heidenreich, thank you very much for your remarks. Thank you very much also for the very illustrative slides. I think it was a very good way to get your opinion about the issue, and also thank you very much for the appeal at the end, which I'm sure will have resonated with the members in the audience. So we've had two very complementary presentations from the commission side, from the manufacturer side, and now it's my pleasure to immediately give the floor to Mr. Dr. Abtinrad from TÜV Süd, who is not only representing TÜV Süd here today, but who is also speaking on behalf of the TIC Council. So, Dr. Rad, the floor is yours.
Yeah, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Martin, for introducing me and having me here. My name is Abtinrad. I'm responsible for the topics artificial intelligence, functional safety, and cybersecurity within TÜV Süd. However, today, speaking as a member of TIC Council and representing, the opinion. Could you please continue with the next slide? So, it's rather a little bit unconventional, but instead of telling you what I'm going to present in this presentation, I rather would like to show you one YouTube video which basically sums up everything I want to say in that amount that you can basically skip presentation. So please, Martin, could you open up the video?
Yes, I will open up the video. If I can just ask the audience to give me just 10 seconds to pull it up on YouTube, and I will be right with you.
Unfortunately, the video is not running in presentation mode, so we have to adapt.
I think we're not hearing the system audio, so part of the
The
settings
sound is not.
Yeah, part of the system settings should be to include system audio.
In any case, the sound was not crucial in this video, as Abtin will tell you. But anyway, now I'm back on the slide, and I'm moving forward after the short video. So I hope that everyone was able to see it even without sound.
Unfortunately, there was quite a lag into the video, so I hope the message there wasn't lost. So basically what you have seen here, you have the CSO, which is the Chief Security Officer, who basically have his protection on. So he has protected his IT environment. And what we see there is that the pen tester who mimics an attacker doesn't really point to the areas where the security officer have secured his system, but rather looks for an unconventional way to attack him and just shooting his legs, which is not secured at all. And what this should show you here, or what I want to bring you as a message here, is a general impression we have from the manufacturers to focus on patch as a corrective measure. And however, I would say just pushing out patch may not be enough to compensate severe damage pictures here as a shot into the leg. Also consider here a patch might introduce new vulnerabilities. Also have in mind the loss of face and reputation after the incident already happens is a big issue you have to take care of. We will discuss it into the presentation later. So another issue in this video is obvious, is that some organizations tend to believe that they can ensure cybersecurity only by testing of the device at the end of development. An attacker here mimicked by the pen tester will not, as I told you, shot directly into the area where he has secured his system, but he will look for entrances that you have not looked at. And this is something we have to consider. Well, let's come to the most important question, which is for a manufacturer or for the healthcare industry, why do we need to consider cybersecurity a medical device at all? So if you look at the healthcare industry, we see more and more medical devices connected to each other, to the healthcare or hospital network, to patient's smartphone, or to the internet. Today, approximately 1/4 of current medical devices are connected medical devices, so 25%. And this number is supposed to rise to 50% within the next 2 years. With increasing number of medical devices, we see an increased number of attacks to access the medical device with different intentions, be it sensitive patient data they want to access, harming the patient, using compromised device and entrance to the hospital network, or locking up your data or your device for a ransom. If we stay with ransom and economic risk, according to Cybersecurity Economy Impact Report, the global cost of cybercrime is estimated to be 500 billion per year. And the number of attacks, as well as the disruptive potential of those attacks, are increasing. And in some cases, they are outstripping the governmental potential to deal with them. Just think about the attack on the German parliament, which takes for weeks. And this leads, by the way, to the very famous statement of Mr. Juncker on cybersecurity and their potential risks that you see at the bottom of this slide. And if we look at, or if we recapitulate some famous attacks from the last years, I think, in my opinion, the eye-opener was the Hospira attack, which was an attack performed by Billy Reyes, very famous white hat attacker on infusion pumps from the company Hospira. These pumps were not even connected to the internet. They were just connected to an internal drug database. However, an attacker, in that case, Rias, was able to attack the device using that internal drug database and can perform or apply a lethal dosage of whatever was applied to the patient. And this example shows how a vulnerable device within your network can be used as an entrance to other potentially vulnerable devices. So another example here, for instance, is the one-touch insulin pumps, which were basically having a vulnerability which allows an attacker perform or apply the whole insulin dosage into the body, by this killing the patients in worst case. Other examples that are not initially healthcare focused are the ransomware attacks such as WannaCry, NotPetya, and Petya. One of the biggest causalities of WannaCry was, as you maybe very well know from the media, the British NHS, with over 600 organizations being affected and partly not even being operational for days. So please, next slide. A recent survey from 2019 by the Global Connected Industries shows that over 80% of the healthcare organization has experienced at least one cyber attack within the last 12 months. And the interesting part of this survey is that 30% of these attacks had the potential to compromise patient safety. And these attacks show a growing trend of attacking critical infrastructure, such as hospitals or healthcare providers. Additionally, these real cases of attacks raises the fear of our patient on medical devices and also ruins the trust into the healthcare system, which basically exists right now. A famous, or one of the most famous example, is the former US Vice President, I think it was Dick Cheney, who adjusted his pacemaker to disable the wireless functionality as he was concerned on a cyber attack on his pacemaker. Next slide, please. Cyber attacks not only aims to harm the patient or demand ransom, there is also the data privacy issue. There is basically no information more private than our healthcare data, right? Imagine what information is available in your healthcare records, starting with your home address, medical conditions, and diseases that you don't other people to know about. And this is exactly the information the attacker is looking for. That's what he wants. One very well-known targeted and planned cyber attack on medical records was on Singapore's largest healthcare organization, Zinc Health, where beside of 1.5 million patient records, especially the Singapore's Prime Minister health record was repeatedly attacked, and information on medicine he was taking were stolen. He's, by the way, had been re-elected a few weeks ago, so he's still on duty. Unfortunately, as we see from the last examples, healthcare sector is typically not as advanced when it comes to cybersecurity as other verticals such as financial industry. The reasons for this could be the late transitioning of the medical industry into digitalization and the missing regulatory requirements for cybersecurity, or maybe the highly regulated environment they are working in. Excuse me. I would like to show you one example of missing understanding of cybersecurity out of our experience with a radiation therapy device, which was accessible for a technician using a remote desktop connection. This remote desktop connection can be established using a default admin password, which is, by the way, identical for all devices of this manufacturer. And the password and the credentials are, in addition to that, also documented in the service manual, because the technician needs to know that. I asked the manufacturer, out of your experience, how many of your clients really change the default password? And his answer was actually very few, if not none of them. I asked the manufacturer, what can a remote user do with this connection? And his response was, well, he can or she can basically activate the radiation. And I asked the manufacturer if this is an acceptable risk, which the manufacturer confirmed. He said, well, I have documented in an instruction for use, you have to change the password. The password is interchangeable, and this is all I can do. And my question here is, how is it possible that all home use internet routers that you use at your home for accessing internet have a device-specific password, which is in most cases printed down on the device itself, so not even found in the instructions, but at the same time, a medical device that could have at least a risk to kill one patient does not have the same level of security. And I can't really answer that. Is it an awareness issue, or is it a false sense of security that nobody will be as evil device? And say, no, they are. And we see it from the past examples. Next slide, please. So with cyber attacks on healthcare, we have the immediate cost, and according to IBM, the cost of a data breach in healthcare is the highest, with $400 per health record, and this states in contrast to $200 for all other organizations, including the financial sector. However, especially the non-immediate cost of a cyber attack should be considered. And this is unfortunately something many of the manufacturers and the industry sometimes underestimate. The reputational damage, especially those against high or large companies, tend to be high-profile affairs, and no company really wants to have that. If we look at the example I told you before, it may be a coincidence, but in 2014, the mentioned Hospiro pumps were attacked. In 2015, a FDA warning was issued, and in the same year, the company was purchased by Pfizer. And in the very same year, the Pfizer again sold the medical device units, so the infusion pumps, to ICU Medical. But to keep it short, what I would strongly suggest any organization to avoid being on the wall of shame of the medical industry, as for instance, MAUDE database or BfArM database on incidences. You should really avoid being published here. Next slide, please. So as part of the procedure to place a medical device into the European market, the organization has to show compliance with general safety and performance requirements, which you found in Annex 1 of the respective regulation. By the way, I'm always referring to medical devices. The same, of course, applies to in vitro diagnostic devices. Here you find requirements such as developing according to the state of the art, taking into account information security and protecting against unauthorized access. But what does it mean for the manufacturer, and how do you show compliance? So the Medical Device Coordination Group, as we heard from Ms. Ampelas, published a guidance document, and this guidance document basically specifies what the content of the Annex 1 mean for cybersecurity. According to the guidance, the basic concept of cybersecurity is identifying, analyzing, mitigating, and managing cybersecurity risks. And this is a core statement of the guidance document. The cybersecurity risk management has to be performed throughout the whole life cycle of the medical device. A very important aspect specified in the guidance document is the secure by design approach, with managing risks from the very early beginning of the development through the whole life cycle of the device, which ends not after the device is being placed on the market, but also includes the post-market phase. The 8 practices defined in the guidance document are identical to the design and maintenance procedures found in the software development lifecycle standard IEC 62304. Now let's have a look at some of the practices, for instance, the secure by design process. Could you go back one slide? Okay, that's perfect. So if you look at the secure by design process, this aims to ensure a defense in depth by a secure design. So I hope we all agree that this real-world example does not follow a secure by design approach. By having first, as you see in a third row, third line, the password hard-coded into the code, and ironically having the most obvious password you can even think about, which is password. If you look at the black market's password list, you will most probably find him at minimum the first one. So this is really ridiculous. And if you please take the next slide, the security level you are achieving with such amount of implementation, so using admin password and username password, is basically that picture. It's a flip, I think. I don't know if you have it in other countries, but in Germany it's Atmos flip, which you can use to lock the door. It's not very effective. The next practice I would like to also mention is, could you please back still, is the verification validation, which aims to test the security implementation and also identify any weaknesses that you haven't been addressed during the secured by design procedure. This could be a pen test, it could be a fast test, it could be code review, and any other verification and validation activities you perform. Next slide, please. So the guidance further specifies on requirements on documentation, post-market activities, and IT security requirements. Could you click on next? And additionally, the guidance emphasizes, as we already heard by Ms. Ampelas, that other EU and international regulations might apply in parallel. Specifically named here are the NIS directive, which aims to boost the overall EU cybersecurity, as well as the general data protection regulation covering individuals' personal data, and the EU Cybersecurity Act, which aims to introduce certification schemes for cybersecurity. Next slide, please. So, just having the long summary of the presentation, I will follow up with a short summary. So I would argue that some of the challenges that are related to cybersecurity are first a higher classification of standalone software, which is related to Rule 11 of MDR. By the higher classification, the involvement of a notified body is necessary, which leads to questions on cybersecurity. And some of the manufacturers, especially those small ones and startups, really not prepared for that. In addition to that, we have the health apps, which are now being prescribed and reimbursed by the insurance companies in Germany and UK. Part of the requirements to be reimbursed are cybersecurity and data security implementations. How does the manufacturer show compliance to the essential or safety and performance requirements? Well, usually by using appropriate harmonized standard, by which compliance to the safety and performance requirements are pursued. Unfortunately for cybersecurity, there are some security elements found in medical device standards such as 60601-1 or 82304. However, no specific security standards for medical devices are currently available. In addition to that, the MDCG guidance document lacks on specification on the implementations, for instance, how to secure by design and how to perform the testing, which is, by the way, of course, not the scope of the document. What is the best practice as well? We see there is an increased interest of hackers onto the healthcare industry. And this is not only an issue for huge companies. What I would suggest, or best practice is here, you need to first understand who wants to attack you, why they want to attack you, and by this identify which attack vectors are applicable to you. Already here and way before the development activities, the security risk management should start. You should include education, your employees and your programmers, your code, your testers. You have to implement basic protections such as secure configuration, patch management, firewalls, anti-malware, encryption, and so on. You have to establish vulnerability management program, establish access management, data protection, data privacy implementations. You have to be aware, or you have to be able to detect an attack through monitoring activities, and you have to continuously monitor your device. You have to have measures in place to react after an incident. As we have seen from the WannaCry attack, some manufacturers didn't have any plan in place for patching medical devices. However, please don't forget that a patch might create other vulnerabilities. So even the patch itself and the patch delivery is subjected to cybersecurity risk management. Most important, adapt a risk-based approach for all security processes. challenge and test the implementation regularly, and implement a secure development lifecycle. Next slide, please. So to summarize what I have told before in very short, in my opinion, our response to the cyber threats require a collective response at minimum on EU level using harmonized standards. An example approach and a good start was Mr. Macron's call for trust and security in cyberspace on international norms, which was, by the way, endorsed by 64 countries. So they just need to deliver now. With these words, I would like, last but not least, point out that the globally increased awareness of regulators on cybersecurity and privacy, as you can see from these three examples, from BSI, so the German Informatics Institute, from the ENISA, and from FDA. Not seen here are requirements from other major players in the market, such as Health Canada, Australian TGA, and Chinese FDA, which have their own guidance documents in place. What I have unfortunately didn't have enough time to discuss in this presentation due to the time issues are adversarial attacks on medical devices incorporating artificial intelligence, which is, in my opinion, a very big and dangerous issue, but as far as I know, nowhere addressed. The individual privacy, the invalidated privacy shield and what it means for the medical industry, well, it's something we have to think about, and the impact of the EMDRF cybersecurity document on the MDCG guidance document is also an issue we should maybe have an eye on. But again, I'm very happy to discuss it during our question round. And with this word, I thank you very much for your attention, and we would be happy to answer any of your questions, if there are any.
Thank you very much, Abdin, for your presentation. Well, it's almost the top of the hour, so I will just use my privilege as the moderator of today's session to actually ask the same question from all the panelists, and I would go in the order of the speakers. So Ms. Ampelas, Mr. Heidenreich, and then Mr. Rad. And the question is basically this one: given the shared responsibility of cybersecurity among different stakeholders, so manufacturers, hospitals, health providers, what are your expectations of collaboration among these stakeholders? What are your expectations in terms of information sharing and any other sort of collaboration that you would foresee to be necessary on top of the collaboration that we showed today in this webinar? So, Ms. Ampelas, if I may ask you for perhaps a 1 minute answer on this, we would be very happy. Ms. Ampelas?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Now you can hear me, I
yes.
think. Well, I think you pointed to a very, very important aspect, and I think that the collaboration is indeed extremely important across all the actors that are involved. We have a very new legislation in place. We will see how this new legislation will work in practice. I think that, as we have pointed out today, we have quite a number of provisions, and we really hope that we will need to look at this from a life cycle approach that has been mentioned, and that makes it even more important to collaborate very closely. I think it's also very important that this is a very developing sector. I thought it was very interesting to hear from the speakers the amount of both software that we are talking about and the risks coming from the cybersecurity. So I don't know if I have more concrete ideas on exactly how the collaboration will look like, but I think it is from our side, from the Commission side, we are absolutely more than willing continue to work very closely with all the stakeholders, from the manufacturers to the notified bodies to the national competent authorities. And I think that it is only with this joint responsibility that we could actually address effectively the problem. And then we will learn as we walk as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Ampelas, for this answer. Mr. Heidenreich, what are your thoughts on this importance of collaboration, especially
exactly.
Collaboration between manufacturers and conformity assessment bodies is potentially one of the issues that is important here.
Exactly, with the focus of meeting the shared responsibilities. We already see today that NIS, GDPR, and the national implementations push our customers to establish such communication and cooperation. And from our side, MDR also gives obligations to manufacturers to see that. And the minimum implementation at the product level would be increased documentation to be shared forth and back between customers and manufacturers, so that manufacturers better understand the intended environment of use and the foreseeable scenarios that have to be considered in risk management on the one hand, and on the other hand, with product accompanying documentation coming along, the customers better understand how to operate a device and how to maintain security, in this setting. So, but I think the legal requirements are only the basis of what can be done and what should be done. Expectations on the customer side are higher. To some extent, customers want support through product and solutions towards implementing NIS and GDPR obligations. And in that respect, again, it's not about only the basic needs, but also potential business opportunities. So I think that opens, excuse me, is really the basis for moving from products to services. Yeah, and it's a challenging topic again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Heidenreich, and I will give the floor to Mr. Rad for last few comments and answer to my question. Abdin?
I'm sorry, I just muted myself. So in my opinion, the only way to go is to have a high level of security. You have to include all stakeholders within. So this is a collaboration between the manufacturer, between the hospital, the user, and the patient. So you have to consider where you put your device in it. And this is, by the way, one requirement found in the EMDR principle and practices on cybersecurity. And I would say one very important part of this issue is the communication between those players, which I would wish would run through a very standardized way, which could be the MDS2 communication protocol on cybersecurity or relevant information. So to sum it up, if we could put a wish onto it, we would wish that the EU Commission avoid fragmentation of the market, having harmonized standards that everyone can follow, and having a standardized communication protocol in regards to cybersecurity relevant information from manufacturer to the hospital to the one who is taking care for the IT security and any other stakeholder.
Abdin, thank you very much for the answer. It is 5 minutes past 4. So I want to thank all of you, all of our speakers for having joined today, Ms. Ampelas, Dr. Heidenreich, Dr. Rad, for joining us. I think this was a very informative session about the regulatory landscape, the future challenges ahead of us from the Commission side, from the manufacturer side, from the TIC side, and I think that also the discussion we had today also sets the tone for future cooperation among all these echelons of the supply chain in a way, and also the echelons of stakeholders. So I think this is a very promising discussion, which I hope we will be able to continue. From the TIC Council side, we will be able to continue having a discussion on this issue. We'll be organizing a webinar, a mirror webinar, but from the US side in the next few months. So you'll receive information about this. And you'll also receive, since you signed up and kindly attended the webinar, the slides that were shared today, so that you can peruse them at your will. So once again, thank you very much to the speakers for joining us today. Thank you to Dr. Fubi for introducing everyone. Thank you very much to the TIC Council team, Rory, Giuseppe, Camilla, for Roberta for helping organize this webinar. And thank you to all of you, the participants, for joining us today. And I wish you a very nice remainder of July and month of August. And we look forward to welcoming you at a further webinar of the TIC Council. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Martin.
Goodbye.
Bye.